Vincent and the Grenadines. For those who are listening on the various platforms, we just want to say a special good afternoon to you, to all our both private and public workers. This evening, we have welcome to our joint press conference with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Public Service Union. We have the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union, and we have on board this afternoon Rise Haruna, which is a civil society activist group. We also have our legal counsel with us. We want to take this time to make an apology publicly for Ms. Zita Banwell. She should have been here, but she is unwell, so she would not be with us this afternoon. We have called this press conference in response to the amendments that were made to the Public Health Act and subsequently the subsidiary rules and orders in draft that was sent to us by the government. We want to look at how these amendments will affect us as public servants and to some extent St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines on a whole. We will also examine the plans that the union has in response to these changes. Today at the head table we have with us, to my right, Mr. Elroy Boucher, the president of the Public Service Union of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to his right, Mr. Oswald Robinson. He is the president of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union. I have with me as well, on my left, Nikisha Williams, Miss. She is the Public Relations Officer for Rise Haruna, and to her left we have our counsel, Mr. Jomo Thomas, who will address any legal implication or legal issue as it relates to this situation. We also take this opportunity to greet the Public Relations Officer for the Teachers Union, Fiona Charles, Fiona Charles. Thank you for being with us today. So we want to start the ball rolling. We are going to give Mr. Boucher the opportunity to greet us and to go into the meat of the discussion. Over to you, Mr. Boucher.
Thank you, Shelley-Ann. Good afternoon to all those persons in cyberspace logging on to Asbot News Network and BL News for following this press conference. Good afternoon to all public servants, including teachers and police officers. Today marks the first day of the industrial action taken by the Public Service Union. It is important that I remind workers and the public why the union voted to withdraw its services from Tuesday, that is today, to Friday of this week. This action was necessitated over the government's amendment to the Public Health Act. Under the Public Health Act, Chapter 300, Vincentians benefited from a number of exemptions from medical treatment, prescribed as a result of the spread of a communicable disease. These exemptions were on the basis of the right to conscience, religion, medical, and children or ward were also exempted. The amendments also remove the word voluntary from immunization, thus paving the way for government to issue vaccine mandates. We have already seen in the first instance such a mandate being imposed on health workers, that is nurses, doctors, or persons in the hospital, immigration officers, customs officers, and persons at the port. About 4 days ago, last week Thursday, following on a decision by the Public Service Union membership to take industrial action to try and force the government to repeal the act that was passed, that is the amendment to the Public Health Act, or to shelve what was already passed in Parliament. The union took a decision, the membership, to take industrial action. Last week, Thursday, at a meeting of the membership again, they decided the form of the industrial action and some of the activities that will include the withdrawal of service. On today being Tuesday, supposed to be and is the first day of the withdrawal of such service, and today is supposed to have begun with the nurses withdrawing their service as what we call Nurses Mental Health Day, and some have dubbed it Nurses Day of Prayer. Wednesday was to have been a demonstration in Kingstown, and for half a day, and Thursday would have also been a demonstration and procession in Kingstown. The union, of course, would have gone ahead and informed, as the Public Order Act would have detailed, we would have informed the police commissioner of the demonstration that was expected to be held tomorrow, Wednesday, and the procession on Thursday. The response by the commissioner to those announcements was a prohibition of any demonstration on Wednesday and the suggestion of an alternate route for the procession and demonstration on Thursday. That route, prescribed by the commissioner, would take us along the Cyan Hill, Arnesville, VG Highway, the Cyan Hill, Arnesville route. The union, having understood what the commissioner said, met last week Thursday to decide on what should be done or the way forward. And out of that meeting, 2 positions were tabled. One was to take on board what the suggestion that was made by the commissioner, that is the route from Cyan Hill to highway trading in Arnesville. Take that route, or to go against what was being said by the commissioner and demonstrate in Kingstown. There are a number of workers who believe strongly that the commissioner's interpretation of the law was wrong, and it is their opinion that he actually got it wrong, and therefore, given the constitutional right to freedom of assembly, freedom of association and assembly, workers felt strongly that it was and is their right to demonstrate in Kingstown. That decision did not take place on Thursday night, and the meeting had to be continued on Saturday, at which time when the members met, they voted to demonstrate in Kingstown. I also want to say that a decision of the membership of the Public Service Union is binding on all members of the union. And I would have heard that given the numbers that were in the meeting and the membership of the union, one would have said, well, you did not even have, let's say, half of the membership that's in the union attending a meeting. And this is one of the issues with organizations like ours, trade unions, such that our current constitution had to be amended over the years, and that's a long time, even before my time, in such a way that the quorum to attend meetings, the quorum to have a legitimate meeting being convened is 25, regardless of what the membership is. There is a revised constitution that has not yet, that is not in place as yet, because the membership have not dealt with it. So our current constitution, let me emphasize, only requires a quorum of 25 for any general meeting. So the quorum at that meeting was beyond what was required in the constitution. And the decision made then to protest in Kingstown is binding on the Public Service Union. I want to state, because the prohibition of demonstration in Kingstown and the right to strike, and the right to strike has within it the right to demonstrate. And it is important for us to understand that this fundamental right to strike, it's not a matter for St. Vincent alone. It's a matter for all of the countries that belong to the United Nations. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights to Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association recall that the right to strike is a fundamental one enshrined in international human rights and labor law, and that its protection is necessary in ensuring just and stable democratic societies. The right to strike has been established in international law for decades in global and regional instruments, such as the ILO Convention number 87, Articles 3, 8, and 10. We also have the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Article 8, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 22. This right is also enshrined in the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the freedom of association and assembly. In Article 8 of the ILO Convention 87, and St. Vincent is a signatory to that convention, it states, the law of the land shall not be such as to impair, or shall it be so applied as to impair the guarantees provided under this condition. Our own Trade Union Act also speaks to the right to demonstrate peacefully. And the law may be able to shed some light on that aspect of the Trade Union Act. So I firmly believe that the decision of the membership is buttressed by all of these laws and conventions, notwithstanding the pronouncement by the police commissioner as it relates to the Public Order Act. On Thursday, it is expected that we will gather at the Public Service Union, that is the members of the union and general public. We all will gather at the Public Service Union and will leave there to embark on a demonstration and procession. I will say that at that particular time, a further determination will be made as to precisely where the procession takes place or the demonstration. It is expected that there will be a notification given in regards to such as is required by the Public Order Act. I want to stress the importance of the action that the unions are partaking in as it relates to these amendments. The removal of the exemption for children from the previous act has implications for the children of the nation. It means that the government can, through SRNO, mandate vaccination, these COVID vaccines for our children. And if we were to follow the trend in the Caribbean, we would know that children from 12 years old up are being vaccinated, and we have seen some of the effects of that out of Trinidad. Although it is known that the FDA would have approved, which is not the same Pfizer vaccine, but would have approved a vaccine from Pfizer for children ages 15 upwards, and it makes us wonder why not 12 years old, and that is for parents to think of. So the government's action in amending the law has literally taken away the right for parents to decide what goes into their children's body. And that is extremely important. Their children, they are our responsibility. And I firmly believe that it is the parents' responsibility to protect their children. And in so protecting their children, to make that decision regarding what goes into their bodies. So these actions are not only for public servants, not only for teachers, nurses, policemen, they are also for the public. And it is important that the public understands that we're not operating in a vacuum. These things, these changes to the law are not even restrictive to COVID alone, but they are in the law permanently. Today, we are dealing with the pandemic caused by the COVID-19 virus. Tomorrow, it could be dengue or Zika or some other communicable disease. And the law has been changed in such a way that it gives the state control over whatever treatment is prescribed for the citizens of the country. It is important for Vincentians also to understand that your right to religious exemption has been taken away. And even in the rules that we have seen, it is not absolute. It is still left up to the authorities to decide whether you are granted an exemption based on religious grounds. And that is quite troubling. And so these actions that are designed to bring attention to what we see as government's intrusion as it relates to our fundamental rights, these actions, we're asking that these actions be supported by the entire country, so that when we gather for a demonstration, a protest, On Thursday, we are inviting children, parents, and other workers to join us as we send the message to the policymakers that we are opposed to the direction in which they are going as it relates to mandating COVID-19 vaccines. I want to say that today I would have heard a report that states nurses, a lot of nurses whom we would have expected to stay off the job. We got a report saying that a lot of them have gone to work. I want to stress the decision taken by nurses to withdraw their service is a decision that is binding on all nurses. This fight that we are in is not a fight that I can go and stand up for you or the next person. It is a fight in which each and every one has to stand up for himself. It is not the time for persons to be afraid to withdraw their service for whatever reason, whether it be a scholarship or a promise of something. We are talking about our fundamental rights. We are talking about the right to bodily integrity. We are talking about the right to medical privacy. I mean, these are supposed to be very important rights, and it is not time for any worker or any Vincentian to put their political party, whatever that party is, before those fundamental rights. If we can't come to that conclusion now, then I'm sorry for us as a nation. If we can't wake up and realize that there comes a time when we stand, then I'm really sorry for us. Because it makes no sense that behind closed doors, we are opposing what is happening, and when the very trade union that represents you, acting on your mandate to do something, decide to do that, and then you yourself, and I'm talking about those public servants who know that they are opposed to these infringements, that will turn around and will not heed the call of the membership itself. It is not the president making a determination. It is the general membership of the union that's making a determination. It is the decision of the general membership of the union. It's not my decision or the PRO's decision or the teachers' president decision. It is the decision of the membership. And a union is, the strength of a union lies with its membership. The executive can go out there and demonstrate in its entirety. Whether it's called on the membership and they don't go, or they don't go in the numbers that are expected, then we are defeating ourselves. Ourselves as a body, not defeating me or anybody on the executive or any executive, defeating ourselves. The strength of a union lies with its membership. And so it is important for the members of the union to understand that and take the firm decision to stand and be counted. And so I will urge all. We have Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as a continuation of the withdrawal of service. I will continue to urge all workers to heed the call that was given by you yourselves, that is the general membership, to withdraw your service. I will encourage all to bring a friend, bring someone, meet us on Thursday around 9 o'clock at the Public Service Union. We have some t-shirts for members. The color that we are using is green. Meet us there, and from there we can proceed to do a procession and a demonstration. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boucher. And I hope that persons are taking notice of the plea that you just sent out for public servants, and not only for public servants, for the general public to join us in this fight. Now, it's important that when any organization is fighting a worthy cause, that we get support from other stakeholders. And we have today the Public Relations Officer from Rise Haruna. We know this is a civil society activist group, and they have been doing their protests along with us and other persons. So I want to give her the opportunity to greet us and to tell us what to expect from Rise Haruna come this Thursday.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nikisha Williams, and I am PRO of Rise Haruna. Please allow me to remove my mask simply to be a little more audible. A lot of persons would have been hearing lately much about Rise Haruna. So let me give you 30 seconds of who we are and what we do. Rise Haruna is a social group. It came into being just about a year ago. We have been doing a number of social activities in terms of when the COVID broke. We were out distributing masks, hand sanitizers. When the volcano came, we were preparing food and clothing and distributing, going above the river and doing our level best to assist the Vincentian public in making things a little bit easier, because we know what we're dealing with every day. Since the volcano, we have come to realize that there are a number of social issues that have been affecting the Vincentian people. And we decided at that time that our first venture would be the Cornelius John debacle. We would have been organizing protests in and around Kingstown. We've gone to as far as Brighton. I think that is where we protested outside the home of Senator Morgan. This situation that we are now dealing with the mandatory vaccine, we would have asked a number of other organizations to become a part of the protest. We saw this coming. We saw it coming. And we would have invited them, and this is where we're at today. Mandatory vaccine. Rise Haruna is not saying no to vaccination. Let me make that very, very clear. We are pro-vaccine. What we are anti is the fact that you want to make vaccination mandatory for persons. You have decided to take their choice away from them. And that in a democratic society should never be allowed to stand. We have organized, we have had many meetings, we have spoken to many stakeholders, and we will be out on Thursday. I remember a quote that said, they came for the Russians, I think it was, that's the first one. And I said nothing because it wasn't me. They came for this one, and I said nothing yet again, because it was not me. Then they came for me, and there was nobody left to say anything, because I didn't stand with those that they came for first. Rise Haruna will stand with the PSU. We will stand with the teachers. We will stand with civil servants and Vincentians, as we have done long before we even started protestation. Protest is the right to protest is ours. It is enshrined in our Constitution, and we will take advantage of such. There is no one that could take that away from us. We will continue to support however we can, and that goes without saying. So the plea from Brother Boucher to come out on Thursday should not be a plea that he needs to make. We are here, each citizen of St. Vincent. It might not be you that is affected today. It's your brothers, your sisters, your neighbors, your great aunt, niece, best friends, neighbor, cousin. We're family. And it's about time we start acting like we remember what that word means. We are a society of united people. Our forefathers didn't come here for us to be fighting against each other now. And this segregation that we're trying to put between our citizens, it needs to stop. This is not a political call for those of you who want to believe that this is a red versus yellow thing. We need to forget that. Rise Haruna is not associated with any political group whatsoever. And we will remain that way. But once there is a cause that our people needs addressed and needs a voice given to, we will be there and we will allow and facilitate that opportunity. So Rise Haruna will be out on Thursday. And if the PSU is going to be out on Wednesday, we'll be there too. And if they're out on Friday, we will be there as well. We will not allow our brothers and our sisters in the medical fraternity, not in the public service, not in the police force. We will not allow any of them to have to stand by themselves. We are much stronger together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikisha. And this brings out the point even stronger, the importance of us sticking together, standing in solidarity with each other, fighting the good cause. As the motto for the Public Service Union says, the cause of one is the cause of all. And sometimes it's not until it affects you. It's not until it's in your house. It's not until it's right in front of you. Then you start to react. It's important for us to stand together. We have with us our sister union. They have been with us for the last couple months. We have been in this fight together and still will continue to be in the fight for as long as we need each other. So I am going to give Brother Oswald Robinson an opportunity to greet us and to let us know what is happening from the end of the Teachers Union. Brother Robinson.
Thank you. Mr. Shellyan Alexander Ross, Public Relations Officer of the Public Service Union. President of the Public Service Union, Brother Elroy Boucher. Our sister from Rise Haruna, the Public Relations Officer. Mr. Nikisha Williams, Council Jomo Thomas. I also acknowledge our acting public relations officer, Sister Fiona Charles, members of the media, other members, executive members of the Public Service Union, distinguished colleagues, well-wishers, those of you who are listening and viewing this very important press conference. I want to begin by bringing you warmest greetings from the other members of the National Executive, the staff, and the entire teaching fraternity. It was Steve Jobs who said, and I quote, "Great things in business are never done by one person. They are done by a team of people." End of quote. This is a very important juncture in the history of the trade union movement here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to some extent, other civil society organizations. We are at a very important point in our history where we are standing to defend our fundamental rights and freedoms. The distinguished brother and colleague, Brother Boucher, did mention and give a backdrop in terms of the implications for the amendments. And the list could go on and on and on. But I just want to crave your indulgence just to mention an additional one before I get into the meat of my conversation. These amendments would have brought upon Vincentians an additional economic cost. We know that testing is also a requirement. And we don't have a problem with testing. But the state would receive $54 from you every month. $648 per year. And if you're in a family of two and you have two teachers, two public sector workers, that will be $1,296 per year. And if you have a family of three, it will be $1,944. And I'm saying this because we are in an economic situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where public sector workers, your salaries, increasing salaries would have been frozen, and this is the second year. And minimum cost of living would have gone up. I say that to stimulate your appetite. It is very important that you become conscious that there's an economic burden that has been placed upon the workers of this country. And therefore, you cannot just sit back and allow this to happen when you know that the workers' movement is calling on you to obey your own instruction. From the teachers' union point of view, we are reminding our teachers to stand up and to stand tall. You have made a decision, and we are going to honor that decision. So my role here is just to remind you that we took a decision, and we reaffirmed that decision at a recent meeting, that we will protest in any move towards making vaccination mandatory and any move that infringes on our fundamental right and freedom. I want to assure our teachers and also the Public Service Union that what we are doing here today, we have full support. In fact, the Caribbean Union of Teachers would have written, and they had this letter waiting for a long time. It was dated the 9th of August, but it came. They were holding it because they know that the Suffrage was erupting, and they didn't want this message loud and clear to get lost. And so they wrote to the Honorable Gaston Brown, chairman of the CARICOM community. And I'm just going to paraphrase. They reiterate the position and the need for social dialogue, which we have been calling for from day one. They also spoke about condemnation for mandatory vaccination. And they spoke to the issue of fundamental rights and freedom, which must be respected at all costs. Similarly, the St. Lucia Teachers Union wrote to our Prime Minister, dated the 19th of August, 2021. And the letter is quite similar. It speaks to the issue of meaningful dialogue, and it speaks to the issue of the threats to the rights of workers and citizens, and the psychological and economical harm to public workers. And it is in solidarity with the Teachers Union of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the other public sector unions. I say this again to remind us that we are not alone in this business. And this should give us the courage to come out and to participate. Remember that what we are doing is a just cause, it's a worthy cause for all Vincentians and for the future generations. So, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union will join in the protest action for this week. We are prepared, we are ready. In fact, our Industrial Relations Committee met and reminded the executive, and they have given us a list of the recommendations, which our executive met yesterday and we accepted. To protest, to stand with our sister unions and other allies in defending our fundamental rights and freedom, and to reject any move towards mandatory vaccination. Believe in our democracy. And we are prepared and ready to defend this democracy at all costs. So, let us exercise our freedom of conscience, our freedom of expression, our right to assemble and to organize. And we must do so peacefully without infringing on the fundamental rights of others. We are also calling on the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to accept the liability as a result of any adverse effects or death caused by vaccination. We also reject the unilateral decision to change working conditions of workers in this country. You cannot change the rules in the middle of the game. It doesn't happen so. It must not happen. And so we are appealing to our teachers to be part of the protests. Come out in your numbers. The parents, the vendors. Your time is coming soon. Just now, you'll be told what you have to do to enter the supermarkets, the banks, and other enterprises. This is not the time to relax. My fellow Vincentians, let us respond. Let us strike now while the iron is hot. Let us make hay while the sun shines. If we don't do that now, we would have failed ourselves and the generations to come. I hope that we are going to be filled with courage. Be like little David. Come out armed with your weapons, and your weapons here are metaphorical, to exercise your right to freedom of expression, to assemble, and to do it peacefully. Somebody says, little in it, little is it when God is in it. And once you put him first, I know the powers that be will not be able to stand up against us. Together we stand together in unity. We stand hand in hand. We stand together as unions, as civil society organizations. Let us come out in our numbers and let us show to the authorities that we mean business. And we must be serious. Let me appeal again to the general public. Come out and be part of history. And do not infringe on the rights of others. We must be peaceful. We must be orderly. And I'm sure that we are going to obey the orders of the police, because they also need us to fight for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Robbie. You made some strong and very interesting points. I hope the teachers are listening and they would be out in their numbers on Thursday. I want to also thank you for introducing me. I just realized I did not. I'm your chairperson, Shelley Ann Alexander Ross, the Public Relations Officer for the Public Service of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to ask, though, Mr. Boucher, the government recently sent out the statutory rules and orders. Those are the laws, the subsidiary laws that came out of the amendment that was done. What is the union's take on that? And they would have asked that the general public make submissions by Wednesday, the 8th of September. What is the union's take on that? And is the union going to respond to the Attorney General through their submission?
The union has actually, we are in discussion with our legal counsel in putting that response together, but there are also thus far public servants who through the union have also made responses. The committee that was set up by the union to address some of the issues surrounding the demonstration have also put together a document that relates to some of the concerns that the public service union have with respect to the rules, the draft rules that were sent out. And I must say, even though these rules are draft rules, when we listen to the government speaking about them, when we listen to the Prime Minister speaking about them, it is as if to say that they are actually written in stone. But nevertheless, the unions have to make a response to those rules. And just to list some of the concerns that we have with respect to the position of the government as it relates to the rules that accompany the amendments. So we have whereas the previous act allowed persons, the medical practitioners, to submit a medical report. These changes are basically now compromising one right to choose their own medical officer and compromises the confidentiality between individuals and their medical practitioner. there really are no guidelines on how the CMO is going to certificate will certify health conditions of people who are claiming exemptions. So we are very much concerned about that. We are concerned that the exemption due as a result of religious beliefs is not absolute. And even when it is granted, you are still saying that there is no guarantee that the person having obtained an exemption will be placed somewhere else in the public service. That's not the guarantee either. So we have a situation where these rules are really bent in one direction, and that is to force all workers, eventually all workers, to be inoculated. That is its objective, and that is quite clear. Hence the reason, if workers don't understand this and understand that, in my view, they have no other option but to stand up in defense of the very rights, because it is because of these amendments we find ourselves in this situation, because the fact that immunization is no longer voluntary, we are at this place. Previously, your doctor would have easily given your medical condition indicate that you are to be exempted. Now that is being scrutinized and tested by the CMO and a team of people. It's no longer an absolute. The right to conscience is no longer an absolute. And those are very serious issues. So we have to make a response to it. We will make a response. I think the deadline is tomorrow at 4 o'clock, Robbie. There will be a response to it. Following that, whether that is material enough for the Attorney General to pay attention to it, as I've said, I've listened to the government speaking on this matter, and it is as if it is a done deal, and it is only the people, the workers, who could do anything about it to stop it from happening. And if they don't, if we don't come to that understanding and that conviction, then we only have ourselves to blame. We have to show our power, our force, show that we are standing up for something and standing against all of these changes. And these rules designed to dismiss workers. And I want to say, listen, I know persons, and I know persons who are so terrified of taking these vaccines, terrified to the extent that they are pursuing early retirement after giving 30-something years in the service. That is the kind of stress the government is bringing to bear on the workforce. Persons who have worked their entire life, becoming career public servants, and now being told that if you're not vaccinated, you can't hold a job that you have had for over 30 years. That is the situation. And now it's vaccines. The next time it is something else. If we don't stand now, when are we going to stand against all of these things?
Thank you, Brother Robbie.
Yeah.
Brother,
In
I
addition,
was just going to ask you to make.
yes. In addition, a very important observation. This battle that we are fighting, we are winning it. And this is why, again, we must be filled with courage. The fact that the authorities have gone back to the drawing board now to publish rules and guidelines, they got a clear message from us. We were talking about social dialogue from the beginning. It may maybe a little late because you don't go into the house to pass the law. You put in the cart before the horse. So the trade union movement, we're taking the lead. And that's why we're leading our people to victory. And that's why you have to come out. You have to stand with us so that we continue to charter the course to deepen our democracy, to protect our fundamental rights and freedom. We reminded them that they sign on to the decent work agenda, of which social dialogue is one of the requirements. We reminded them that they sign on to a number of ILO conventions. And we reminded you also that the G20 ministers met last year in April. And when the Director General spoke, the G20 ministers reaffirmed the position of the Director General. Among other things, what stood out, you must have inclusion of the workers' organization, the trade unions. You must engage the representative voice of the workers. In fact, that reaffirmation clearly stated that this is one of the effective ways of fighting the whole crisis that came about as a result of COVID-19. You know that. You have been there. We have reminded you. And still you have not provided us with the policy. When we had our first press conference right here, probably a day or two after, we had a meeting with government. And one of the things that was promised is the policy on how we're going to manage this whole crisis of COVID-19. You have not seen any policy. We're putting the law and there's no policy. Well, based on my basic understanding, you're supposed to have the policy and then you come with the law and then you come with the regulations to enforce. So the trade unions again were taking the lead and we're winning. And if you want to continue to win, you have to stand up with us. All of us must get on board. This is not the time to, and as the sister mentioned earlier, this is not the time for partisan political affiliation. That's your business. You decide that. We want a collective response, a meaningful engagement to ensure that we protect our democracy and we stand up for it so that the future generations can enjoy what we have enjoyed. We have that responsibility and we have to stand up. And now is the time to do so. And let us be proud in doing so with dignity. Let us really show that we are true patriots. A lot of people talk about Châtelet, but when the time comes, they want to hold on to the colonial, the imperialistic laws that hinder our people, that enslave our people. People want to take us back down to the mental enslavement. That's why I always quote Paulo Freire in my studies. He used the term conscientization because he worked with the poor and working class people and he empowered them so that they were able to effect change. Same man said education is highly political because when you provide people with the avenues and the opportunity to empower themselves and to make informed decisions, you get a better society, you have a better people, and we're able to progress. We want to progress, and in doing so, we have to stand together. We have to unite, and you have to say to the authorities, no, at this time, what you're doing, you're not doing it the right way. Listen to us, and let us work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Robbie. You wanted to come in here, Council? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. I just want to make a comment regarding the proposed protest demonstration for next Thursday, because as you know, the union had given notice to the police commissioner as head of that organization. And the police commissioner wrote extensively and in essence denied the commission to hold the protest demonstration in front of the market. And after going through the Public Order Act, he says, to quote, "As commissioner, I cannot usurp the authority that was granted to me by Parliament and authorize your organization or anyone to breach the law. Furthermore, the route proposed is, if granted, would at some point contravene the specified time section of the law." And he goes on to propose other things. And as counsel for the union, we were asked to respond to this law. And we did an analysis of the Public Order Act and, in essence, told the Commissioner of Police that he was not having a proper appreciation for the Act and, in essence, had been misapplying the Act. So, in our final paragraph to the Commissioner, in response to his letter, we said, "Taken together, your instructions and our orders, as per the notification of the Public Service Union, amounts to a misapplication of the Public Order Act and flies in the face of the constitutional protection accorded to citizens of our emerging civilization. Therefore, the legal, honorable, and proper course of action is to rescind your prohibition and promise cooperation and protection to public workers willing to engage in peaceful protests in defense of their constitutionally protected rights." Now, why did we say this? Clearly, the Public Order Act is intended to do a number of things. And clearly, laws allow for time, place, and manner restrictions. But the application, the interpretation which the Commissioner of Police renders the Act is such a strict constructionist approach to understanding the law that what he concludes is clearly a misunderstanding of the law. So, for example, he says that what he's doing is in an effort to preserve good order and public safety. Now, evidently, he's presuming that this protest is going to be disorderly. What the police responsibility is, because the police comes from the premise, their mantra, their remit is to protect and serve. So where there's a protest, it is for the police to protect public safety and also to protect those who participate in the protests. So it matters not, although the law says that you should not be within 200 yards from the Parliament. The law says that, but you can be within 200 yards of the Parliament if you're not disrupting Parliament. In this case, we know that the protest that's scheduled for Thursday is going to be in front of the Parliament building, but Parliament would not be in session. So it would be interesting to see what is the approach of the Commissioner of Police. Because evidently, the building where there is not a parliamentary sitting is the parliamentary building, but there's no sitting, so there's no disorder there. And even when there's a parliamentary sitting, it is improper for the Commissioner of Police to conclude that in his application of the law, that he would be usurping his authority granted to him by Parliament to allow for the participation of protesters in front of the Parliament. Because in his letter, what the Commissioner of Police does, his action, his proposed action, flies in the face of the last 70 years of political history in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That people, organizations, whether they are trade unions or political parties or pressure groups or whatever, had always had as its desire to come to the center of Kingstown and participate in legitimate protests. So in 1951, when the 8th Army of Liberation, led by George Charles and Joshua, was coming into fruition, what they did was to march from Honnesville to Kingstown. The Baptists always marched into Kingstown. Every Labor Day, I was growing up as a young man in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The unions marched into Kingstown. In Joshua's People Political Party had marched into Kingstown. When the United People's Movement of Ralph Gonsalves and Renwick Rose and Mike Brown and the others were launching the electoral campaign of 1979, they marched from Sion Hill into Kingstown. So, what is this notion now that in 2021, when we are supposed to be broadening our democratic best practices, we are now curtailing on the rights of people to participate and to demonstrate their fundamentally protected right to assemble and protest? It seems to me that the Commissioner of Police clearly misunderstood what the law said, and clearly what he ought to have done if he didn't have a handle on this thing was to speak to the Attorney General of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who would have given him a better read of what this law means and how this law should be carried out or should be implemented in keeping with the more higher and superior law, which is the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He has failed to do that, and if he carries out his actions here, it means that he's setting up the state of St. Vincent, the coercive state of St. Vincent, against the majority of the people of St. Vincent, whose sole and only intent is to engage in peaceful, democratic, constitutionally protected rights, to protest, to demonstrate, to indicate to the leaders of St. Vincent and the Grenadines that some of the things that are happening here should not be happening because it is violative of their rights. Leaders may disagree with that, the police high command may disagree with that, but in a democratic society, let the ideas contend. But certainly, you cannot take an adversarial position anticipating that an activity of public workers would be rowdy and disorderly, and therefore you are trying to prohibit it. I think that is not an application of the law. In fact, as Justice Jamada from the Caribbean Court of Justice says, that is not a rule of law, that is rule by law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and for that thorough execution of or explanation from the legal aspect. You wanted to, Ms. Williams, you wanted to say, okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon again. There has been much conversation about each one coming out to support the other. And I am here this afternoon to let the Vincentian people know that Rise Hairuna has managed to form a coalition between a number of islands within the Caribbean, namely Trinidad, Antigua, Jamaica, Barbados, and we are currently working with a number of others. On Thursday, when we come out to protest, they too come out to protest. This is not an issue that is unique to St. Vincent, but it seems as though the governments within the region are all working together where this is concerned. As a result, it is the responsibility of the citizenry to also work together. Antigua will be protesting, Guyana will be protesting, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad. We have all decided to stand together because there is strength in unity. There is no other way to put it. We must, at this juncture in our history, send a very clear, a very bold, robust even message to the powers that be, that it is us that are the government. The people, the governments, our prime ministers, all our ministers, parliamentarians, they are not, it's not us that work for them. And we should not be afraid of any government. It is the governments and their policies which should be afraid of its people. We will not stand quietly. And I believe if we know there are others out there fighting for the same cause as we are here in St. Vincent, it doesn't feel so lonely. It doesn't feel so isolated. We're in this together. So let's march on.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I know Rise Hirona is not, well, directly affected by the subsidiary rules and orders. I don't know if you wish to say anything as it relates to what the government would have laid out in the rules and orders.
We have also gone through the documentation that has been presented, and we have seen a number of issues with it. One of the issues that we have currently is that the change to the Public Health Act does not stick just with the COVID. It is not just a COVID act. It's not a COVID act. This act affects every disease, every infection, from the common cold to a boom toe. This act affects it. At any point in time, the government may decide to implement something, God forbid, and I do that again, God forbid, that it is anything more dire than what we're facing now. We cannot change one act because of one disease and think that is going to stay there. That's not where it stays. We remove something like this and it is for eternity. It stays there. We have seen the governments of the world operate in panic, and it is costing a lot of persons their lives and their freedoms. Vincentian people, we see you, we understand, and it's about time that you see for yourself. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, we will entertain any questions from the media. Mr. Chance?
Actually turn out to vote today today by extension. What percentage went to vote?
I can only speak to what I've been told, and I have not verified the information, but I've been told by reliable sources that about, it was 75% of the nurses turn up. That is the information that I have gotten, Kenton.
Indictment on the union that it now has to plead with the members of the various unions to stand by the decision that you are saying that those same members make. Sorry.
It's not an indictment. The union held a meeting with nurses alone. In addition to having a meeting with nurses and the rest of the public service, given the peculiar nature of the essential services, a meeting was held specifically with nurses. Those nurses voted overwhelmingly to take industrial action because they strongly opposed the vaccine mandate. I know that leading up to this first day of withdrawal, that the Prime Minister have been pleading with the nurses not to stay home, pleading with them and reminding them of all of the whatever scholarships or whatever he did, which is a responsibility of the state, not the Prime Minister. That's a responsibility of the state. So I really do not know how many persons would have been so affected by that. What I do know, it cannot be an indictment on the union because the union are the people themselves. We are here fighting for those very nurses who have extreme difficulty with the government's policy. Not a Boucher's decision or Mr. Lewis' decision. It is a decision made by all of them, or the majority of them that were present at that meeting, even except 2 or 3. And we would have spoken to them twice, 2 separate meetings in which they committed to withdrawing. I would say this, Kenton, today is just Tuesday. And that is why I find it necessary to reach out to them again, because it is not worth it to sacrifice your freedom on the altar of whether it is partisan politics or whether it is self-interest, that is material things. It is not worth it. In the end, nurses and their children have the potential to be severely affected by their decision. But there is a possibility that they can lose their job. The union is not addressing this matter purely from an industrial action standpoint, you know. The union have also instructed its lawyers to take legal action. This is not a one strategy. And I've seen in Guyana, where the trade unions along with the umbrella body have come together to file a case against the SRNO that was put out by the government. I very much expect here in St. Vincent for us to do the same. I very much expect that. So we have the nurses and the rest of the public service covered. Whatever is necessary for us to safeguard their jobs, we will so do. If you look at the SRNO that is being put out, it's ironic. You're not being dismissed for not being vaccinated. The threat is not a dismissal for you not being vaccinated. The threat there is a dismissal for you breaking the rule to go on the compound when you're not supposed to turn up if you're not vaccinated. Misconduct for breaking a rule of not going on the compound. That is what they're saying, and that I find rather interesting. So you turn up for your job, and they are locking you out. You break that lock with the lock. You enter the compound, they say illegally, and you are actually charged for misconduct for entering the compound illegally. The hope of the government is that 10 days will pass in which the public service regulations state if 10 days pass and you haven't turned up for your job, you would have abandoned your job. The hope of the government is that if you're not vaccinated and you are going to the company, but you can't go in and they're deemed that you're absent, 10 days would have passed, and 10 days meaning that you are absent from a job for 10 days. But are you really absent? And that is something for the lawyers to really deal with. Are you really absent? You have been going to work. So we are looking out for the interests of nurses and all public servants in this regard. The executive of the union cannot fight for nurses or doctors or pharmacists. They have to also fight for themselves. That is why it is called a trade union. It is the purpose of a trade union is to fight for the interests of its workers.
Legal action. What legal action in particular? To write letters or to file a suit? What legal action?
Particularly to file a suit. File a suit regarding, and I mean, Duma Thomas is here because one of the questions that I had asked very earlier is whether we needed something to trigger a legal action. That is, I was of the view, and I'm still of the view, that the amendments should have been challenged as being unconstitutional. But the lawyers, of course, given the fact that that is their area of expertise, can best strategize how they go about that. That is for them to advise us on. But it is expected that some sort of challenge will be made, whether it is to the SRNOs, if they eventually become the subsidiary law that the government is intended for them to become, or the amendments themselves. We expect that to be done.
Well, it's not an indictment. Sometimes people could change their minds for any reason. It's also a matter of choice. People have a right to associate and a right to disassociate. That is in our constitution. We also are encouraging the collective principle, because when you take a collective action, it is much more comfortable for the majority of persons to respond favorably. But you're dealing with human beings, and you always have to make room for that. I know for a fact that the Public Service Union, just like the Teachers Union, would have written to the Governor General. Okay? So I know for sure that the workers are covered, and we cannot always put all the strategies out in the public, because the people are listening to these conferences to strategize. Sometimes you have to catch them off guard. Can't spell out everything in the public. But we are preparing ourselves also for any eventualities, anything that would infringe on the rights of our members. We have done it in the past, and we will continue to reap the fruits of success. Because I've been saying that when the government is speaking about the common law or administrative law, we're talking about constitutional law. And they didn't qualify as yet. They reach up to the standard. So if they want another wrong again, we are preparing ourselves.
Two respected regional jurists have given the heads of government of the OECS their view on mandatory vaccination. And their opinion is that the constitutions of the OECS do support mandatory vaccination.
Yeah, that's an opinion also. We could also have other opinions.
But have you discussed with your legal counsel?
Yes, counsel respond to that. But we have seen this. That's what I'm telling you. We can't spell out everything in the public. But the counsel is here and is the best person to answer that question. But we would have seen the document, and we have studied it. And as I said, there are also other opinions. So, counsel.
as counsel for the union, Teachers Union, the Public Service Union, we have had occasion to look at the opinion which Kenton referenced. And that's an opinion by two highly respected legal luminaries, one Rosemary Antwine, who heads up the law school in Trinidad, and Justice Dennis Byron. He has tremendous pedigree. He is a former Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. He's a former Chief Justice of the Caribbean Court of Justice. And they have issued a 16-page opinion in which they have said that they are convinced that the statutory law and constitutional law allows these governments to do what they are doing. Now, I would respectfully say that the system of laws in the British Commonwealth is an adversarial system in which different sides come up against each other. And I was struck in this opinion by Antwine and Byron that there was little or no citation of laws which emanated in the British Commonwealth. The laws which they cite had to do with laws, with opinions from the United States, which increasingly are gaining persuasive authority, but they are not the definitive binding law of our region. So I would be a little cautious, and maybe it's because this thing is just unfolding and we have not had a lot of cases. I know there's a case out of St. Kitts where SRNO was challenged and the judge dismissed the challenge. There was a case in Trinidad, Courtney versus the Attorney General of Trinidad, where Miss Courtney had challenged the government for locking after they brought the lockdown. That case was dismissed, although there's some very, very important legal arguments in there by Justice Guru Singh. Interestingly, there was a piece in the Newsday out of Trinidad, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where two outstanding regional luminaries, Trinidadian by birth, Israel Khan and Ramesh Maharaj, both of them said that they agreed that they think that the governments may have some basis upon which they can institute mandatory immunization. I was shocked, however, that in their opinion, and this is why I say that this is an adversarial system, both Israel Khan and Ramesh Maharaj says, you know, on the issue of these issues of fundamental rights, this issue is ticklish. I don't know if you all understand and have an appreciation for the point that they were making, but Israel Khan, Ramesh Maharaj says it's ticklish, means that it has not yet been decided. There was a case out of England where an 86-year-old lady had been living in a nursing home, and the nursing home wanted to give her, to immunize her. And apparently in all of her life, she had been an activist, had been opposed to these kinds of things. And that case out of the English court said that based on her long life history of activism and what she might have wanted, this lady is now suffering from dementia or something like that, and couldn't make the decision for herself. But the court ruled that because of her history and because of her feelings and because of her conscience, that the nursing home could not administer the immunization to her. So this is an evolving area. You can expect a tremendous amount of litigation. And it's going to be interesting to see. My own view, and I've articulated this before, that at least procedurally, our government has gone about what it is doing in an improper fashion. Our government talks about declaring a medical emergency in March of 2020. And I have asked the Attorney General for that SRNO, I think it's 18 of 2020, because I want to see what it's grounded in. Because I don't get an impression that it is grounded in the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I haven't seen anything. I know the Prime Minister talks around these questions, or we have common law, statutory, and constitutional authority. But the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is the highest law in the land, Section 17 of the Constitution offers emergency powers to the government in cases of war, earthquake, fire, volcanic eruption, including pestilence and infectious diseases. That's Section 17(2)(b). As far as I am aware, the government has not invoked that constitutional section. And consequently, I am pretty convinced that there's a strong argument to be made that procedurally they have not done what they need to do, and consequently what they're doing are unconstitutional. But that is a question that we are working through, and certainly a claim would eventually be brought to the court, and the judges here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines would make a decision as to whether the government is doing what it is doing properly. But those are just preliminary opinions from having looked at what they have done and having looked at the cases, the plethora of cases across the region and further afield, and coming to a conclusion which may well prove to be correct. I don't say what I say without giving some serious thought to it. So that's how I would respond to that question. On the issue of Antoine and Byron.
On page 13, I found this very interesting, where it speaks to dismissal, other sanctions, and reasonable accommodation. And I quote, "While there is a strong argument towards making vaccination mandatory, the issue of sanctions, including dismissals of persons who refuse to comply, should be approached cautiously, ellipsis marks. However, in the Caribbean, dismissal law tends to be stricter." And it goes on to speak about, unfair dismissal. So can you speak to the issue of people who might not, maybe as yet, want to take this vaccine, but who might do so out of fear of being dismissed as a consequence of their refusal to take the vaccine? In essence, how easy would it be for the government to dismiss a public servant because he or she fails and or refuses to take the vaccine?
Well, to dismiss a public servant is not that easy, particularly where the public servant decides not to go quietly into the night. The classic example of that is Otto Sam and Jamal Eve White and the three teachers who had ran for the NDP in 2010. So it's not that easy. But there's another point on page 6 of that opinion that I find quite, where both Byron and Alexis are couching their argument, which tells me that even though they write a rather highly supportive opinion in favor of the government's action, which incidentally is even more over the top than the opinion written by Senior Counsel Leslie Haynes for the Barbados Attorney General. Because in Leslie Haynes' opinion, which is much more extensive, is 103 pages compared to 16 pages for Byron and Alexis. She talks about Haynes talks about different issues and really go into the nuance of the arguments and so on and so forth, which to me is a much more substantive legal opinion than what we had from Alexis and Byron. So I am of the view, and at least my office is of the view, that the issues which are raised by the pandemic and which are coming to fore now, and where the governments are trying to impose on workers, are not as easy. Because as you correctly said, when the government forces someone or tells you, look, this is not mandatory, you have a choice. But it's like somebody meeting you in the night and telling you your wallet or your life. Because in essence, when you tell a worker who has a family, who has even if they don't have a family, that they must take an injection or they would lose their job, or if they show up for their job, they would be said to be misbehaving, and that misbehavior could result in them being sanctioned and eventually losing their job. It is as if you are forcing them or imposing on them a form of economic assassination, which I am sure will be played out in the courts for much into the future.
Battle, sir. The union is winning the battle. How do you respond to maybe, let's say, a member of your union who says that the union is not winning the battle and the government is just paying lip service to the union by giving a form of consultation?
Well, the process is respected, but not agreed. You see, we are winning, and I give the facts. We call for policy, you produce guidelines. So they are responding. So we are winning the battle. And that's why we're here again today. Because this is another battle we're winning, because we're educating the whole nation. So people are being empowered. People are becoming much more conscious. And it's just to encourage them not to give up, but to keep standing and stand tall, and not to be sidetracked. You know, the politicians would always use their little tactics to sidetrack. But we want our people to remain focused as we go forward together. And it's a very good question. So here again, we are demonstrating that we are respecting the views of others. Yes, we could respect the views of others in a very mature, responsible way, even though we may not necessarily agree. Thank you for your question.
Council Thomas, your chambers in its letter on Friday, written by Council Barnwell, said that the Public Order Act, in your opinion, does not apply to trade unions. So my question, if that is the case, is there therefore, based on the opinion of your chambers, a need for the trade unions to notify the police 24 hours before there is a procession or protest or anything like that?
That's the thing. That's the thing.
I don't think that there was an absolute need for the trade union, because when you read the Trade Union Act speaks to particular responsibilities of trade unions and people who are acting in the trade, what they need to do. And the Trade Union Act clearly allows trade union members and leadership to engage in certain kind of activities uninhibited. That's one point. But the other point is that on the issue of notification, I don't even have the view that the notification needs to be written directly to the police officer. To the police department. You can make a public service announcement, in my view, based on the read of the act, which informs the general public and everyone else, all institutions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that you're holding an event. Now, but even where you have to notify, if you come to the conclusion the police must be notified, the question then becomes, if notification is intended to ask for permission, and the clear, strict reading of the act tells me that the police, you're not asking for permission, you are simply saying we intend to engage in a constitutionally protected right. And we are telling you so that you, as the force in St. Vincent who are mandated to protect and serve, to preserve order, can be there. Because in the same way in which the police takes the view that some people who are legitimately part of the protests may engage in disorderly conduct, you could also have provocateurs and fifth columnists who could come into a protest and do certain things which could precipitate an action. And if the police is not alert, the police may vamp on the legal, legitimate organizers of the protests and miss the persons who are actually agent provocateurs. So that is why you want to notify, so the police with all of their training would come prepared to spot provocateurs. And the moment they start engaging in an activity, so for example, you're in a protest and you see someone comes and they knock over a barricade, you take that person out of the protest. It may not be necessary to arrest them for something as intangible as that, but you may want to take them out of the protest because they may be an agent provocateur, or they may just be someone who is over exuberant, engaging in an activity. So you should not use that to tar the legitimacy of the activity, because there were hundreds of people in the market on August 5th. Some people, a very small group, decided they're going to throw bottles and stones at the Prime Minister, and out of that, the Prime Minister got injured, other people got their head busted from police action and so on. How now do you take that to blame everyone who had been in the protests, including persons who were totally and completely opposed to that kind of activity? It seems to me, and this is why the police chief and the police high command need to be very discerning, and the Minister of National Security need to be very discerning in speaking to those who are responsible for security in the country, that we don't want to close down legitimate constitutional activity, but we want to ensure that legitimate constitutional activity takes place in a peaceful and ordered fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. That's your last question. Any other questions from the other media personnel? Any questions from online teachers? There was one question, Brother Boucher. It says, what, if any, anti-union boasting measures have you adopted, especially given allegations of Cuban nurses being flown in?
I heard about the Cuban nurses issue, but I've been told that it is not really true. That it is just a rumor. And the only anti-union union busting tactics I've seen, really, and I would not even call it union busting, is really the Prime Minister trying to change the minds of persons. And by now, we should be very, very much aware of that and do not allow that to really influence our decision. So I would not even call it a union busting. That's a regular behavior that person should by now be aware of, because even in the case of nurses, is it the same nurses who were demonized, threatened, Now you turn around and say, oh, you love them, oh, please don't do this. Come on. Those nurses should be smarter than that. Out of the same mouth coming curses and cursing and blessings. The Bible have also spoken about that, and not in a good way. So they should be aware that the unions are standing in their interests. The unions, including, when I say unions, although they are nurses, the teachers' union is also standing for them, and the unions across the Caribbean. That is more comforting than the words of your Prime Minister, who will put you down today. And when you are reacting, try and make you believe as if you are the most loved person in the world. They ought to be smarter than that.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher. I think that it is for questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, any final words, Robinson, or we can close? That's it.
Well, just finally to remind all workers, everybody, whether you're public or private, even those who are unemployed, come out and be part of the activity. And let me remind you that we are doing it peacefully, and you do not infringe on anybody's rights. Okay? Make sure that all protocols will be observed, wear your mask, distancing, and sanitizing, and all that. Okay? Because we don't want people to use this activity as a scapegoat to continue to infringe on our rights.
This whole issue, because one of the points that I'm not hearing, on the issue of vaccination, we talk about, we need vaccination to get back to normal and what have you. But the evidence suggests, and the Minister of Health last week did acknowledge, that COVID-19 spreads just as easily among vaccinated and unvaccinated persons. The disparity, the defining point is that people who are vaccinated are more likely to have a favorable outcome, as in COVID-19 is less likely to affect them in a severe way. So, the unions, they have your legal representative, but do you have a medical advisor as you engage in your activism?
Yes, we have been seeking input from medical officers. In fact, we have gone to the extent, and this should be coming on stream quite soon, where we're going to have a forum for the membership as it relates to the COVID vaccine, their risk and their benefits. That is currently being organized. So we do have doctors who give advice to the union when that is required, and that is going to be extended, of course, to the membership. As I'm here, let me say my final thoughts. I want to again remind public servants, including the nurses, about the protests on Thursday. We are living in a democratic country, not a communist country. And in a democratic country, trade unions are allowed to demonstrate, and the police or the security forces are expected to be there to protect the trade union members who will be demonstrating. We are not a political party, we are a trade union. And under the UN and the ILO, trade unions have that special privilege where they can demonstrate peacefully in front of any building where the employer is, for the single purpose of getting their message across. I do not expect that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that we are going to have police or security forces assaulting or bringing any harm to bear on trade union representatives and the members. We are in a democracy.
Thank you, Paul.
Just one final word in response to the question that Kenton would have asked. Yes, the Teachers Union, we have had a forum where we provide public health education to our membership. You know, we have actually had the benefit of 2 medical experts who are also in favor of vaccination. So we use the resources of the state and we educate our members so that they would be able to make an informed decision based on the information that they receive, whether they would be vaccinated now or they would delay or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, union leaders. No last words? Any last words?
Just one question, and that question simply is, today it is the adults that are being pressured to vaccinate. The vaccine that is here is for children 12 and over. The question I have for you is, do you honestly think that your children aren't next? Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Members of the press, thank you for coming. Union leaders, our council, member of the Rise Hairuna group, thank you for being here. And let me just echo again, peaceful protest on Thursday. And let us try as much as possible to adhere to the protocols that are settled by the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment. So we want to thank you again for joining us. Thank you, public servants and those working in the private entities, those in St. Vincent and in the diaspora. Thank you for joining us in our joint press conference as we go forward in the fight against mandatory or the proposed mandatory vaccination that the government is offering. So we are for vaccination. We are just against the protocols that are put in place that makes vaccination mandatory. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.